The DJI Air 3S is hands down one of my favorite drones right now, and in this video I'm going to walk you through the complete settings guide for photo and video. So whether you've just picked this up or you've had this for a while, I'll show you exactly how I've set mine up for sharper images, smoother footage for cinematic results without overcomplicating anything. Just so you know that we are looking specifically at the Air 3S today. However, most of these will probably apply to the Air 3, the mini drones and even the Mavic drones, but there are going to be some variances and differences in the settings. So if you do spot any of those, just let me know in the comment section down below, and that way other pilots can see the differences as well. Now, first up, let's talk about resolution and frames per second. So on the Air 3S, we have the option for 4K or 1080p for horizontal video. At 2.7K, this is only for vertical. And the frame rate options we have are from 24 frames per second all the way up to 60 in video mode. We do have a slow motion mode as well. However, this is dedicated slow motion footage. And we can have 4K 120 or 1080p 120 or 240 frames per second. Personally, I always shoot in 4K 30 unless I'm flying really low to the ground and I want to slow down my footage in post, then maybe I would put it to 4K 60. However, like I said, most of the time I'm just in 4K 30 and this has been plenty. If you're someone that shoots solely dedicated vertical video, then stick to 2.79K as this is going to give you the max resolution possible for social media. However, if you want some more utility with your footage, so you can repurpose for both YouTube and Instagram or TikTok or other social platforms, then probably shoot 4K 30 and crop in, and this will still be plenty of resolution for social media. And the max resolution for them is 1080p. Now, as for color options, we have normal, HLG, and D-Log-M. Now, if you want it good straight out of the box, select normal and you'll be fine sharing this with social media. However, if you wanted slightly more dynamic range, HLG is a good option. Now, I personally don't use this. The one I use most of the time is D-Log-M. This contains more information in the shadows and the highlights. The image is flat. However, you can use DJI's conversion LUT, which is free, or you can use one of the ones I've created. If you've seen this channel before, all the footage that I post has been graded with the LUTs that I use. So what I'll do is I'll put a link in the description box down below. And if you do decide to purchase, appreciate it. Thank you very much. It helps me make more content like this. Just note that the DJI Air 3S has 14 stops of dynamic range, but it's only achievable in video on auto mode. And if you're shooting in D-Log-M and you don't want to see that flat image, you can just toggle the color display assist. At least that way you get to see what the final result will look like. Now, in order to access the color profiles, we have to be in the video mode. And if you go to the main menu, we can select this here. In Pro mode, this is pretty straightforward because you have the access button already there. Now let's talk about exposing your shot because we want to make sure our image looks good without clipping the highlights. Now, if you are using auto, this will do a good job and this will allow you to concentrate on framing your shot and composition, which is probably more important if you ask me. Just note, if you are using auto, make sure your exposure value is -0.3 or -0.7, especially if you're facing the sun, and this will prevent clipping the highlights. If you want to know more about getting smoother shots, just let me know down below. This also simplifies the information on the screen, but to adjust more settings, you need to keep going into the main menu. You can also lock your exposure as well by just tapping on screen and pressing hold. Now, if you want more control, we can put this into Pro mode to control our exposure manually. Here is when we want to follow the 180-degree shutter rule. So if we have it at 4K 30, we need a shutter speed at a minimum 1/60, and we want to keep our ISO as low as possible. Now in Pro mode, the good thing here is we can set ISO and shutter speed to auto and let the drone do the work again, or we can just stick our shutter speed to 1/60 and then leave ISO to auto. The drone will do a pretty good job during the day with not fluctuating the ISO too high. Where we want more control of this is when we are in low light. So when in golden hour, for instance, and the sun is setting faster or it's just set, then maybe we want to control the ISO so it doesn't go too high. The good thing is if we have ISO set to auto and the shutter speed fixed, we can control our exposure value again and setting this to -0.3 or -0.7 depending on the time of day. At the end of the day, having the exposure is lower will help prevent clipping the highlights. If you want to see some more night footage with the DJI Air 3S compared to the Air 3, then click the video up here. Now, white balance is another one of those factors where you can keep this on auto and you'll be fine, and that way you can just concentrate on the flying. This would probably be better for newer pilots who don't have much experience yet and just want to concentrate on that flying and getting some footage. But if we don't want those color shifts, and it do happen when you are rotating the gimbal from left to right, up and down, it's going to change. And you can see this happen in Pro mode where the white balance changes. So in order to stop this, we can just select this to manual, and a good number here is 5700 Kelvin, and this is a good daylight value. Alternatively, when you have the drone pointed in one direction, just tap on auto to toggle it off, and this will fix the white balance temperature is at that time. There has been times where I have just kept this on auto where I know I'm going to get consistent lighting, so bright sunny days, no clouds. However, if I know there's going to be some sun and some clouds and it's always going to be changing, then this is probably where I'm going to fix it. For every flight you do, just learn to adapt with the different scenarios, and that way you will improve in getting better footage. Now, regardless of whether using auto or pro mode, it's always a good idea to use ND filters to control the exposure and have that natural looking motion blur. My current go-tos are freewheel split NDs because the DJI Air 3S has two focal lengths and each of these have a different sensor size. So the 24 is a 1-inch sensor and the 70mm is a 1/1.3 sensor. In order to balance that exposure, we have to have different NDs for each of those. However, if I wanted to control things like reflections, I use K&F's ND CPLs, and that way I can help cut the reflections off water and glass buildings. Now, how do I know which ND filter to use at what type of day? Well, I'll put this on screen here as a cheat sheet so you can take a screenshot of that, and I'll also put it onto the community post as well. But the more you fly, the more experience you get. Think of it simply like this: the brighter the light, the stronger the ND that you need. Plus, every time you put this on, you'll be able to read your drone's exposure meter as well. So if it's reading at +1, you know you need a stronger ND filter. If you're enjoying this video, I'd really appreciate a like. Yes, it does push the video out to more people, and it also tells me that you enjoy videos like this. I've also had people ask about features like the vision assist and how you can drag it off screen into a different place and enlarge it and how it works. So if you want to know more about features like this, just let me know in the comment section down below. And if you want to join a community of like-minded people who like drones, photography, gears, and travel, then hit that subscribe button. Now, for sharpness and noise reduction, there isn't really a specific set of rules here, as it's just down to personal preference. And I have covered this already with the DJI Air 3S. So if you want to see an actual side-by-side comparison and how this affects your image, then click this video up here. And just to be upfront, I just fly with the default settings. That's just what I like. I know that others prefer reducing the sharpness to -1. Again, down to personal preference. Now let's talk about the gimbal settings, and this one is probably the most important if you want smooth footage. I see a lot of drone footage online where they're not got good control with their gimbal, and it's really like a sudden stop, and it just doesn't look good at all. Now on our drones, we have 3 profiles: cine, normal, and sport mode. Now most of the time when I'm flying, I just fly in normal. I have got used to the sticks to not give full stick deflection, and I can do a half stick movement and get smooth results. And this is just the way I fly. Unless I know I really specifically want to slow down the drone, I'll stick this into cine mode. However, for each of these profiles, you can adjust the settings to your liking. Now again, there isn't a specific setting. What works for me might not work for you. So the best way to do this is to go out into an open field, set this to cine mode, and then just adjust the settings on the fly by moving the drone backwards and forwards, tilting the gimbal up and down, and seeing what works for you. And then do this for each mode. Probably just do this for cine and normal mode and leave sport on default. That's what I've done. I'm not really flying in sport mode that much unless I'm trying to catch up or chase something, and then switch it back to normal mode. Most of the values I have been default, but the main ones I have changed is the gimbal control speed and tilt smoothness. Here, just play around with what works for you on how fast you want the gimbal to move and how smooth you want it to slow down to come to a stop when you let go of the dial. I actually wish you could save these to the cloud, because every time you reset it, unless you don't have a screenshot of what you had it before, you kind of lose this and you have to redo it. So either take a screenshot of your settings, or DJI, please let us save these settings to the cloud so that way we can move it from drone to drone. Now that we covered all the video settings, let's look at some photo settings. So on the DJI Air 3S, we have 12 megapixels for the 24 and 70mm, and we also have a 50 megapixel for the 24mm and a 48 megapixel on the 70mm. So the only time I actually use 12 megapixels is if I'm doing long exposure shots with an ND 1000 or 2000 during the day. And this is where we can adjust the shutter speed to be as long as 8 seconds on 12 megapixels. Whereas at 50 or 48, the maximum time we can have is 2 seconds. This again all depends on the time of day and how long of an exposure we want to correctly expose for that image. Now the options that we have for photo settings are JPEG and RAW. Most of the time I'm in RAW. Again, I'm always underexposing my image by 0.-3 or 0.-7, depending if I'm facing the sun or not, just so we don't clip those highlights. And if I know my deliverables and they're not needing RAW files and only JPEGs, then just shoot JPEGs. Or to be safe, just put this to RAW and JPEG, but then you're gonna have all these files built up. So most of the time, I'm just shooting in RAW. Now shooting in RAW contains more information, and this just allows more flexibility in post when editing your photos. All the photos that I use my own presets. They're available on my website. I'll leave a link in the description box down below, and you can take a look at my Instagram as well. Everything's edited with the presets that I have. Now, if you are shooting in challenging lighting conditions and you don't know if you're going to expose the image properly, we do have a feature called AEB, Auto Exposure Bracketing. And here you'll be able to select whether you want 3, 5, or 7 shots. And again, we can only get 7 shots at 12 megapixel. At 50 megapixels or 48, we can get 3 or 5. And also this requires more post-processing, as you have to stitch them in the editing software of your choice in order to combine them to have one correctly exposed image. I don't really use this feature that much, but if you do come across challenging lighting conditions, maybe take a single shot and auto exposure and compare both. We also have panorama mode. Maybe I can do a dedicated video here, but we have several options with panorama, whether we want to shoot RAW or JPEG. Do we want to have a JPEG output as well? And do we want to do AEB on panorama? And this is just something I recently discovered, and I haven't seen this before. So maybe we do a dedicated video and compare the differences. Most of the time, I'm just shooting RAW single shot for panoramas, and then always having a JPEG output as well. Now let's cover some bonus settings. Now, I won't cover safety specifically, but if you want to know more about that, you know what to do. Drop something down below. Now, the first up here is the button customization on the DJI RC2 or your controller here. For C1, we have several options here. I have mine to tilt up down, but you can change this to whatever you'd like. That's going to be useful. We have things like follow an FPV, auxiliary light, vision assist, etc. So whatever feature you use the most, set this to C1 button. I find tilting the gimbal up and down 90 degrees quite quickly is very useful, especially if you want to do that top-down shot to just reset the gimbal. That's a good one to have. For C2, I have this to either cruise control, or if I'm flying at night, I would switch this to auxiliary light so that way I can see where the drone is and I can turn it on and off. However, other useful ones here is if you're planning waypoints will be good, set your exposure to lock on or off, or to switch cameras. So instead of having to tap on screen to switch between the 24 and 70mm, you could just customize one of the buttons to this. As for the right dial, you can customize this too. Normally by default, this is set to zoom. I've turned this off. I do not like digital zoom. I've set mine to control the exposure value. So if I want to drop my exposure, I can just move the dial left or right to increase it or decrease it. So again, if I'm facing the sun, I might want to decrease this value. If I'm just filming regularly, I want to put this to -0.3. Again, pick whatever suits you and your style of flying. Now the good thing is here we have more customizable as well with the C1 buttons by holding the C1 button and the dial at the same time. Now the way I've set this is to control the shutter speed and ISO with C1 and 2 and using the dial. So instead of having to tap on screen and changing all my settings, we can just hold these customizable buttons and change the settings on the fly. Now let's cover some extras in the main menu. Now video subtitles store some flight details. It's not compulsory, but I've just kept mine on default anyway, just in case. We also have an anti-flicker setting as well. So if you're in auto mode, for instance, and you don't want to have the flickering lights, and this depends on the region that you're in, depending on the light frequency, this will help prevent the flickering with the lights. So if you're in full manual mode and you have your shutter speed locked to 1/60 and your ISO locked at 100, this won't be available to you. So you have to either keep ISO to 100 or your shutter speed to auto for this to be able to work. The histogram is also really useful to check your exposure. So technically we want this peak in the middle or just slightly to the left of that to underexpose. Because it is see-through, this is great and we can just float this around anywhere on screen. I usually keep this to the left towards the top and it works fine there. We also have a peaking level. Now most of the time, most of us are shooting in autofocus mode, so we won't really see this. However, if we want to use manual focus settings, we can actually see what's in focus by using the peaking level. And we can either have this at low, normal or high. I have mine on normal, but this is really good if you just want to nail manual focus. Or if you're taking a photo of yourself or self-portrait, you want to make sure in your focus, you can switch this to manual by clicking on the autofocus on the right hand side and then scrolling up to control your focus on this drone. We also have our zebras. So if we want to check if something is overexposed, we can toggle this on and off. Now this can be distracting. I actually don't have this on. I turn mine off because it can be really annoying sometimes when you're trying to see what you're doing. However, for beginners, if you want to check they've exposed images properly, turn this on and then that way you can see if your images for photo or video is going to be overexposed because the whole sky will go into like white and black lines. However, using the histogram will be a good guide and not having to need this. But again, choose what works for you. The other one here is composition using the grid lines. Now we do have a diagonal as well and a center point. I'm not a big fan of the diagonal. I always just have the grid lines, and the center point is if you're trying to fly through a gap, you want to see the center of the drone, you can put the crosshair on. I just keep mine on the grids and that way it will help me compose my photos and videos. We also have a frame guide. So if you're someone that shoots in 4K 30 but you want to frame specifically for a certain scenario, whether it's old TV or vertical video, we can have these guides turned on and that way we can see what's going to be captured in the frame. So the whole image will be captured, but when you are trying to frame a shot, at least you have these guides and these could be really useful for you. Additionally, here we have custom folder and file naming. This is actually really useful for traveling. I used this a lot when I traveled to Kefalonia last year. So having to go from one place to the other, I would sit there and customize my folder settings. So I'll be like day 1 and then the file names will be for that specific location, and when I go to another location I'll change that again. So when you go to export your SD card, all your media is already organized, so you don't have to go through each file to find out what location was which. So that could be really useful for travel to organize your media on the fly. The last one here is allow quick transfer and sleep. So if we turn the drone off and we packed it up and put it like this, we can actually access these files through our phone through the DJI Fly app without having to turn the drone on or open it up, which is perfect. This was the problem with the Air 3 that I had originally. We don't have that now with the Air 3S. We can just access all the files while it's in sleep mode, and it's really handy. So just keep this on. So once you finish a flight and you want to share something really quickly, you can grab it off your drone using this method. If you enjoyed this video and you're thinking about picking up the Air 3S or Air 3 and you can't decide, check this video here. Or if you're thinking about getting into FPV, then check out my 1-year review with the Avata 2 here. I'll see you in the next video.